There's a boom market in animated features right now, and in this country that usually means family films like Beauty and the Beast. But in Japan, many animated films are made for older audiences, and one of the best-selling examples of that is a violent and bloody futuristic fantasy named Akira. The movie takes place in a post-nuclear Tokyo where street gangs and heavily armed motorcycle riders war for control of the city. This apocalyptic universe is one of violence and sudden death, and the animation and soundtrack sometimes make the movie seem like a high-tech video game.
What are you waiting for?
Wow, wow, wow. It's 1992, the Cold War is over, history has ended, for good guys, I promise. And your name is Roger Ebert. You're America's top film critic, you've got a kick-ass home movie setup.
These are just movies. Look at the Laserdisc. I think they're so beautiful. It kind of looks like what they would eat off of in the spaceship in Close Encounter.
And you've rented a tape. It's a cartoon. It's called Akira, but get this, it has violence and explosions.
The movie itself is sort of an animated version of Mad Max. Very gory, very gruesome, but entertaining in its own demented way, although not, like a lot of animated films are, not for children.
It's pretty common in cinephile circles these days to hear complaints about Roger Ebert. Partially, it's just a case of overexposure. It's hard to find a Wikipedia article on a notable 20th century film that doesn't seem to underline his opinions in the reception box. Part of it, too, is because he did often get it wrong, particularly when he indulged his worse moralizing instincts. And partially, it's because of what he embodies, a certain middle-brow affect. Will Sloan of the Important Cinema Club describes it this way.
He's representative of something. He's representative of mainstream taste. White, liberal, upper middle class, educated mainstream taste. And within those parameters, like his taste is a bellwether of what a reasonably educated, reasonably liberal, upper middle class guy would think at any given moment in history.
And yes, I can understand all of this. But also, I simply cannot overstate the importance of this teddy bear of a man in my cinephilia. When I was a teenager, Ebert was the reviewer I would read. There was no Letterboxd, but there was RogerEbert.com, and when I liked a film, I would immediately check to see if he did too. Yes, I was that much of a dweeb. I think it's generally known among anime circles that Ebert was surprisingly favourable to the medium. At a time when most Western press, and to be honest, most non-anime fandoms, wanted to pigeonhole the medium as either porny smut or mindless commercialism, Ebert kept a cautious interest in it. I don't think he was ever an anime fan, per se. I doubt he was regularly renting OVAs from his local Blockbuster, but his reviews of the anime that ended up on his desk were more often than not positive. And you can sense in them an attempt to position the medium in favourable terms to an audience who would probably have had quite a few apprehensions about watching a cartoon from Japan. Anyway, blah 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 intro stuff, let's talk about Roger Ebert's anime reviews. So I'm going to begin out of order with Ebert's review of the 2001 Tezuka adaptation Metropolis. I'm beginning here because I love this movie, and I also really like this review. Metropolis can be quite Marmite. It's blending a whole bunch of tones, acting as a tribute to Tezuka's sci-fi manga, as well as to the pre-war cartoons and science fiction that inspired him. So it's a movie with a lot of context, and yet Ebert was completely able to hang with it. Much of the review is an ode to the city in the film itself, which Ebert calls one of those movie places that colonize our memory. Ebert also reviewed this on his TV series, when it wasn't Ebert and Siskel, but Ebert and Roper. Much to say about this segment. Roper, who sucks, is very much the archetypal anti-anime critic here. His position is basically, get this bug-eyed stuff out of here.
Metropolis is based on a comic book by Osamu Tezuka, creator of Kimba the White Lion and Astro Boy. The characters speak Japanese, but they have the weirdly Euro-American features of horrible, big-eyed dolls you might win at a carnival. It's as if Dennis Hopper has taken over the Hello Kitty franchise.
And Ebert, in a really cute moment, gets very defensive of the film.
Now, I know the small but fanatic band of anime lovers will find much to admire in Metropolis, but I found it intriguing but ultimately tiresome, so
I love this movie. I loved it. It's probably going to be on my list of the 10 best films of the year.
Really?
It's so visually vibrant and exciting, and things are happening all the time. And that city, the imagination that went into drawing that city and its details, and the stuff that's around the corner or down the street, in the corners of the screen, all fabulous. The story? basically a science fiction story, easy to figure out if you've seen Blade Runner and Metropolis and AI for that matter. The characters, Richard, anime always uses these big eyes.
Understand that.
And what's interesting is the heroes are like that. The villains are look more like Marvel superheroes.
Yeah.
They have regular features.
But they all
and
move about
there.
like, real crude, kind of simplistic things.
Crude and simplistic are the wrong words. This is a style.
This
is a style.
I think the style, if it's deliberately crude and simplistic, that's
is
fine.
great animation.
But it gets boring after a while. No, the backdrops are great, but the characters themselves are, they kind of move like old-time
you're
cartoon
exaggerating
characters.
how badly.
And they kind of talk in this, real exaggerated style, and the plot is, I thought, boring.
I think you have to develop a taste for anime, obviously.
Yeah, you do.
And hundreds of thousands of people apparently have it because every video store is filled with anime. This is a great movie. I really love this movie.
It's an interesting genre. It's not for me, and I think it's far from great.
Anime's greatest soldier over here, Roger Ebert. One of Ebert's first written anime reviews is for Roujin Z, the Katsuhiro Otomo sci-fi satire of Japan's aging population crisis, which was shown along with Ghost in the Shell in American cinemas in 1996. Ebert spends a fair bit of time in this review introducing the concept of anime to the reader, and like a lot of Western press at the time, there's a certain gee whiz, did you know cartoons aren't just for kids anymore? Quality to it. Still, Ebert does show an awareness here of the anime home video market, which I think is kind of impressive for a legacy media figure at this time. And also, he likes Roujin Z. He doesn't love it, it's only a 3-star rating, but he appreciates the imagery and the social satire, and he seems charmed by how un-Hollywood scripting is. It's interesting actually that Ebert is clearly writing here before some of the common Western prejudices or preconceptions about anime have set in. I feel like a few years on from this, it would become the accepted position that anime is sort of badly written and also often has these like clunky, stilted or ponderous dialogue. But Ebert here is actually taken by the occasional philosophical musings in Rintaro's film, which he compares favorably to Hollywood. He says, "The dialogue is also intriguing. Dubbed into English, it ranges from standard comic book slang to the thoughtful, literate and controversial. Speech of this level would be dumbed down in a studio rewrite." A week later, Ebert reviewed Ghost in the Shell, which he would also talk about on his TV show, Siskel and Ebert. Funnily enough, he's less taken with its philosophical musings, which he takes seriously, but seems to find too cold and detached in nature. But really much of the written review is taken up by Ebert being kind of perplexed by the persistent nudity of the Major. He gives this very half-hearted psychological explanation for that nudity, which he says he's getting from Film Quarterly. He says this: "The movie uses the film noir visuals that are common in anime, and it shares that peculiar tendency of all adult animation to give us women who are A, strong protagonists at the center of the story, and B, nevertheless almost continuously nude. An article about anime in a recent issue of Film Quarterly suggests that to be a, quote, salaryman in modern Japan is so exhausting and dehumanizing that many men, who form the larger part of the animation audience, project both freedom and power onto women and identify with them as fictional characters. That would explain another recent Japanese phenomenon, the fad among straight teenage boys of dressing like girls." This, of course, caught my eye, because what is Ebert referring to at the end there? Is this some mangled understanding of the Otokonoko manga boom? That was mostly in the 80s, but it did have a resurgence in the 90s. Or is it some even further mangled attempt at describing the concept of a bishonen? Well, I decided I wanted to answer that question, which led me to the Film Quarterly article that he mentions. It is titled, deep breath, "Magical Girls and Atomic Bomb Sperm, Japanese Animation in America." I don't really feel like saying the author's name because they're still fairly active, and I would very much doubt that they would stand by this article they wrote in the mid-90s. But this is like the archetypal, gee whiz, these Japanese cartoons sure are strange style of article. And to be honest, even by those standards, it is pretty odd. There's a good breadth of anime covered, so as an introduction it works okay, I suppose, but the reader really cannot help themselves. everything becomes a setup for some really cod psychological reading that usually seems to outstrip their knowledge of Japanese culture, as well as, to be honest, Western fandom culture. Like, on the act of fan subbing, they say,
might be satisfying for Americans about this is that it essentially allows them to steal Japanese culture away from Japan. Perhaps this is some form of revenge on a consumer culture which seems to have surpassed their own in its power and complexity.
And there's plenty more where that came from, let me tell you. Take mecha and horror anime. These genres are apparently, in anime, a site of anxiety around miscegenation and Korean-Japanese relationships. Yes, really, that is the argument. And what is the evidence for this nuclear hot take? Basically nothing. Something about D and Vampire D being like half human, half vampire, which is a pretty common motif in vampire fiction. And also something about the body horror stuff in mecha things like Guyver. That is it. That's all you get for that nuclear hot take. Similarly, we are told that Ranma 1/2 plays upon a fear that otaku who enjoy romantic comedies all have of, quote, becoming a woman.
Like Ranma, the male anime fan has a feminine half who enjoys passively consuming animated fantasies about love. His attachment to non-sexual romance might be said to feminize him.
Yes, I'm very smart. I feel like this used to be much more common back then. Not only did we need articles constantly prefaced with, wow, can you imagine? This cartoon isn't for 5-year-olds. But also just like the concept of there being shows with cute girls talking to each other, watched by men, or partially watched by men, had to come with like a million explanatory notes. It's so exhausting. Maybe people just like when cute girls are hanging out. Is that so crazy? Anyway, that thing Ebert said about Japanese teens cross-dressing or whatever, I cannot find it in here. There is for sure a ton of stuff in the article about otaku being feminized or being worried about being feminized, so maybe Ebert just misremembered that or something. I don't really know. Maybe he just overheard something in a bar. Who knows? Ebert was painfully befuddled by Pokemon the movie, in over his head and worried for the minds of young millennials. Much of the review is less about the film itself than it is about Ebert's confusion over the ontology of Pokemon itself. What is this game? What form does it take? What are its rules? Ebert is very unsure. So a very curmudgeonly review, to be sure, but to be honest, I really enjoy its irate venom. Recounting a salon interview with a young fan of the game, Ebert eventually says, "Is there even a game at all in the sense of Monopoly?" Sean cleverly deflects the question into a description of the Pokemon Empire and how much money you can make as a Pokemon tycoon. I used to collect baseball cards, but at least there was a game called baseball, which existed apart from the cards. You don't play Pokemon in any sense that involves running around or catching anything or scoring runs or getting dirty. It sounds more like early training for commodities brokers.
But what is this really about? I mean,
well, it's about love. It's about a lot of things.
It's about acquiring Pokemons.
Only 3 short paragraphs are devoted to discussing the film itself, which for Ebert compares unfavorably to My Neighbour Totoro, and which he mostly sees as a lot of sound and light signifying nothing. He ends on a slightly moralistic bent, saying there is no level at which it enriches a young viewer by encouraging thinking or observation. This review is in a similar mode to his response to the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, where he takes on a similar sort of anti-commercialism, think of the children affect. It's silly and a little hectoring and not my favourite form of Ebert commentary, but I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy this review in all its old man yells at cloud glory. Ebert was generally pretty welcoming of anime, surprisingly willing to engage with its eccentricities, but in its multimedia sprawl, Pokemon was his hard limit. As he concludes the review, I may have completely bypassed the point and misinterpreted crucial Pokemon lore. This may disqualify me from ever becoming a Pokemon trainer. I can live with that. One of my favorite Ebert factoids is that this guy loved Final Fantasy Spirits Within. Folks, he gave this movie 3.5 stars out of 4. That is a higher rating than he gave to The Matrix. Ebert just loved this thing. He says it all comes together into a kind of amazing experience. It's like you're witnessing a heavy metal story come to life. At one point he says, "Is there a future for this kind of expensive filmmaking? I hope so, because I want to see more movies like this." Folks, Ebert yearns for a future with more Final Fantasy Spirits Within. In fact, I am not kidding when I say that he compares this film's release to the birth of cinema itself. He compares it to the advent of sound in cinema. Final Fantasy is a technical milestone, like the first talkies or 3D movies. You want to see it, whether you care about aliens or space cannons. It exists in a category of its own, the first citizen of the new world of cyber film. Beautiful stuff. I mean, clearly Ebert is mainly talking about the visuals here, and this whole review has that tenor of like, imagine if you gave a Victorian child Gatorade, they'd probably die. But like the thing is, Ebert here, he is that Victorian child, and Final Fantasy was his Gatorade, and it fucking killed him. So I think it's a beautiful review. He doesn't even dislike the plot. He says it's bog standard, but he kind of likes it. Yeah, I don't know. It's the most boring movie ever made. If any of you watched Spirits Within recently, I mean, it's kind of aesthetically, it's pretty cool, and like it is going for something, and I kind of like the ending, but like it's kind of a boring movie. I don't know, Mr. Ebert. But you're happy, and I'm glad that you're happy, so that's great. Ebert was surprisingly middling on Tokyo Godfathers, giving it a respectable but average 3 stars. We're at odds here because this is actually probably my favorite Satoshi Kon film. I don't know, I just love the way it captures the light and feel and mood of being in a city at night in winter. I think Hana is an all-time character. I just find the whole thing so moody and evocative and funny in a really heartbreaking way. Ebert is appreciative of the film, but he devotes much of the review to just reiterating the old favorite talking points when it comes to 2000s anime coverage. Yeah, this film isn't for kids. Nope, it's not animated like Disney, and so on and so forth. However, I do quite like this little description of limited animation. Kon's style doesn't approach full motion animation, but uses a simplified approach of a lot of anime, with simple backgrounds and characters who move and talk in a stylized way that doesn't approach realism. If you see this style for 30 seconds, you're likely to think it's constrained, but in a feature film it grows on you and you accept it, and your imagination makes it expand into an acceptable version of the world. Ebert did not enjoy Steamboy, Katsuhiro Otomo's steampunk follow-up to Akira. I considered rewatching it for this video because I have not seen Steamboy since it released, but I decided not to because my feelings on it were much the same as Ebert's back in 2005. I found it to be filled with beautiful imagery that didn't really go anywhere, deafening action, and a chaotic third act that stretched on much too long. Perhaps my feelings on it would have changed now. Perhaps Steamboy looks better in 2025, but I have a sense I will never know. Anyway, Ebert largely uses the review to expound upon his feelings on action. That action without stakes or consequence tends to be dull and punishing for a viewer. A memorable line here: objects endlessly in motion are as repetitive as objects forever at rest. Quick Patreon segment here. Thank you again to everyone for supporting me. It's a massive help, particularly with the loss of my academic job this semester to budget cuts. It's not all doom and gloom, however. This summer I wrote a novel. It's called Exosuit Girls, and it's basically my take on the mecha genre. So if you enjoy this channel, I think you'd probably be interested in it. It's weird and it's gay and there's lots of mecha pilots with migraines and IBS. I'm currently querying it, but if there are any literary agents watching or anyone who knows a literary agent who might be interested, let me know. Okay, thank you everyone. I've decided to tackle Ebert's Ghibli reviews in one section because while there's some really nice writing in these, they're also slightly more uniform because, folks, as I imagine you can guess, he really liked Ghibli. Princess Mononoke received the highest star rating on his scale, 4. You won't find many Hollywood love stories, animated or otherwise, so philosophical, he says. Princess Mononoke is a great achievement and a wonderful experience, and one of the best films of the year. My Neighbor Totoro, 4 stars. Here is a children's film made for the world we should live in, rather than the one we occupy. Spirited Away, again 4 stars. Reviewed twice by Ebert, once on release, then a year before his death in 2012. In the second review, Ebert enters a kind of reverie. Has any film ever contained more different kinds of beings that we have never seen anywhere before? As I watched the film, I was spellbound as much as by any film I consider great. Ponyo, 4 stars. Ebert is losing patience with his peers who refuse to watch an animated film from Japan. He says, already I have heard from a few people who don't want to see it because it's Japanese. This is solid gold ignorance. Is it only dubbed? I was asked. You dummy. All animated films are dubbed. Little Nemo can't really speak. Howl's Moving Castle, the only Hayao Miyazaki film I found Ebert was middling on. 2.5 stars, a parade of weird characters come on stage to do their turns, but the underlying plot grows murky, and, amazingly for a Miyazaki film, we grow impatient at spectacle without meaning. Upon release, this was a much more popular opinion than I think is now recognised. He also didn't like From Up on Poppy Hill, though I guess most people didn't. I prefer not to think about it because I don't want to beat up on Goro Miyazaki. 2.5 stars, also. He says the film centres on 2 likeable and perfectly straightforward college students who do nothing very extraordinary and are in a platonic romance. That is correct. Isao Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies, 4 stars. This review is interesting because it's really an active attempt at canonization. He compares it to the Italian neorealist tradition, to Rossellini and De Sica, as well as to Ozu. In his concluding paragraph, he writes, "Because it is animated and from Japan, Grave of the Fireflies has been little seen. When anime fans say how good the film is, nobody takes them seriously. Now that it's available on DVD with a choice of subtitles or English dubbing, maybe it will find the audience it deserves. Yes, it's a cartoon, and the kids have eyes like saucers, but it belongs on any list of the greatest war films ever made." He mirrored these thoughts on an extra included one of the film's DVD releases.
There are moments when not much happens, and that to me is one of the key elements of all Japanese animation, is that they are willing to go to all that trouble to animate little inconsequential moments. Somebody just doing a little behavior, somebody adjusting their clothing, or just turning around and then turning back. And so the fact that they give themselves the luxury of putting in extra stuff, additional stuff. The Fireflies, for example, that in Grave of the Fireflies, that they use to illuminate their cave, are very beautiful, and they are given a little moment of silence and contemplation.
So I suppose this is where I wrap everything into a neat bow by saying why this matters to me, why make a video on what one American critic happened to think of the stray anime he was occasionally tasked with reviewing for his weekly column. And I feel I could say something here about the monoculture and the increasingly fragmented media silos we all find ourselves in. I could note that Ebert is primarily interesting in that he provided a bellwether for what the median taste of an American middlebrow intellectual was in the 20th century. And I could say that in losing him, we lost something like that, but I don't actually feel that way. I'm not sure the research I've done for this review has supported the position that we are in some post-monoculture fallen era. Rather, this has reminded me of just how weird people always were, long before smartphones were a thing. Like, if the 1990s did involve some agreed-upon consensus reality, then was that one in which mecha anime were seen as being about Japanese-Korean racism? Or was that just one person's big old hot take, which nowadays would appear on Twitter, but back then was folded neatly into the pages of Film Quarterly? In that article, by the way, the writer mentions that one fan they interviewed said they enjoyed anime because it wasn't so dominated by, quote, political correctness. It's the same culture war as now, just with different terminology. So, why is this subject so interesting to me? Well, I guess the simplest answer is that I really enjoyed Roger Ebert's writing. Of course, he wasn't perfect, and he was kind of midbrow, and he got it wrong fairly often. But as a kid, his reviews were the exact right mix of welcoming and explorative. they did give me a way into seeing which directors were considered the greats and why. His reviews told me about them in a way that was exciting and authoritative and approachable. And I think it meant a lot to me as a young cinephile in the 2000s to see a critic this respected who was willing to go to bat for some of the anime he saw. Again, I don't think it necessarily shifted things that much. Metropolis wasn't brought into the film canon because Ebert liked it so much. But his review was something I could point to. I could point to it and say, hey, I am not crazy for loving this movie. I don't want to be overdramatic, but in many ways it was kind of lonely to like anime so much in the early 2000s. Not to mention, kind of embarrassing. If it wasn't Ghibli or Cowboy Bebop, then it was met with derision in most circles. Not to mention, even with stuff anime related that was generally liked, I often had the experience of most enjoying the parts of it that everyone else seemed to agree was cringe and bad. It's only really been in the last 10 years or so, say, that thinking that Raiden is an interesting character has become a non-controversial opinion. For years, every discussion of Metal Gear Solid 2 had to involve a prerequisite set of complaints about how whiny and annoying and feminine he was. But I was drawn to anime and JRPGs and Japanese video games because they were providing all sorts of things I wasn't getting from mainstream Western media. I liked the big emotions, I liked the in-your-face pop music, I liked the bishonens, and I liked the cute girls doing cute things. At the same time, I didn't want to sequester myself in the anime commune. I also enjoyed art house cinema and just regular cinema, and I wanted to watch movies with big dramatic actors and interesting faces. I loved the movies. And I think for me, as a kid, Ebert's reviews were one of the things that showed me that I could like both. That anime really wasn't so different from everything else. I mean, it was different, but in the ways that all sorts of movements and genres are. It still had shot compositions and framing and characters and visual language and all the things that make movies great. It was still under that big tent that is cinema, and Ebert could see that, and so could I. I suppose the only other thing on the table is the question of what Ebert might have thought of the various anime that have come out since his death, particularly in this period now where I think we can say that anime is pretty mainstream, or at least as mainstream as it's ever been in the West. I don't feel the 2010s were a great time for the kind of auteur-driven anime film that occasionally made its way onto his desk. The only director I could see him really loving is Kiichi Hara. Both Miss Hokusai and Colorful are really beautiful, sensitive films that I think fit into his humanist sensibilities. But they didn't really get wide English language releases anyway, so I'm not sure he would have seen them. Then there's Hosoda, who I think he probably would have gone along with okay. Maybe would have had some problems with his pacing, I don't know. Makoto Shinkai's Your Name was really lavishly praised by the Western press, for whatever reason. I wonder where Ebert would have been there. And then there's the various shonen films that ended up getting wide releases. I doubt he would have enjoyed those, but then Mark Kermode loved Demon Slayer, so who knows?
Plays out on this eternal train.
Anyway, that is enough talking from me. I will catch you all later. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
You had to do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it on purpose.